Okay, guys, since fourth period got snowed out, and this is a super important lesson, this 8.5, since you will definitely need it in pre-cal, I'm going to make a video over the worksheet that's on iTunes U. So if you want a copy of this worksheet, you can pull it off iTunes U. I also put just the answers on iTunes U, so if you want to practice working this, like, do the problems yourself, check them. Okay, these are the ones I got wrong, and then come watch the video over the ones you got wrong. That would be a good idea, too. If you want to watch me do a couple of these and then go do some by yourself, that would be a good idea, too. Just do what you need to do to be prepared to work independently on 8.5 on Monday when you come to class. All right. So first step is always to label the triangle. Here I have an angle, and a side. So angle, angle, side is a law of sines setup. So here I have the sine of 55 over his buddy, 11.7. Remember, the sides go with the angle that they're across the triangle from. Then I have this guy, sine of 47, and he is going with EF, which is who I'm looking for. So from this point on, this is just a basic proportion, even though it looks scary because it has signs all in there. Sine of 55 is just some decimal. Sine of 47 is some decimal. So it looks scarier than it actually, look at me, still at school, it is. So I'm going to cross multiply 11.7 times the sine of 47. And that will be equal to, I'm running out of room here, equal to x times the sine of 55. So at this point, I could multiply these two in my calculator if I wanted to. I am just going to go ahead and divide. You work at the pace and take as many steps as you need to be successful. So at this point, I'm just going to type this in my calculator. 11.7 times the sine of 47, close that parenthesis, divided by the sine of 55, and I get 10.4. So this would be 10.4. And I can tell that that's a reasonable answer. If 55 degrees made a side of 11.7, then 47 degrees should make a slightly smaller side, but not that much smaller. So 10.4 seems like a reasonable answer there. Okay, yet again, we're going to start by labeling. So here I have a side, and an angle. So side, angle is, again, law of sines. So I'm going to do sine of 80 with his buddy 100 equals, I'm after J, so the sine of J with his buddy 61. Okay, same cross multiply. So 61 times the sine of 80 equals 100 times the sine of J. You can tap this out in your calculator, this 61 sine of 80 if you want. I'm going to keep it till I am all the way done, but whatever to your preference. So now in my calculator, I'm going to type 61 times the sine of 80. Make sure I close my parenthesis for 80, divided by 100, and I get 0.6007. Now remember, whenever you need an angle to come out, that means you have to do sine inverse. So I'm going to do the sine inverse of 0.6007, and out will pop angle J. So sine inverse of 0.6007, and I get 37 degrees. Again, that seems like a reasonable answer. If 80 degrees produced a side that was 100, then 61, that should be a significantly smaller angle. So it is almost half, or a little more than half. Okay. All right, I'm going to skip over to number 4 because I'm going to do one of each kind. I just did a law of sines to find a side. Then I did law of sines to find an angle, so I had to use inverse. So now I'm going to do 2 more. Okay, so this is a side. So side is for law of cosines. So what you want to do with cosines, it's imperative first that you find out who's A, because A is the important part. If you look at the law of cosines formula, erase that little dot right there. A is the important part of this formula because A is the side that's over by itself and A is the angle that you're interested in. So if you figure out who is A, who am I interested in, then B and C, it doesn't matter, you can flop back and forth. So I am interested in finding angle Z. So angle Z is who I'm interested in. So his buddy, 9.7, has to be the side that's over by himself. Now my other two sides, 6.8 and 14.7, those are going to be B and C, and it doesn't matter who I call B and who I call C. They are interchangeable. I'm running out of room. Okay, now this one, solving law of cosines for an angle measure is out of the 4 choices, this one's the hardest, and it's really just because it's a lot of algebraic steps. It's not really that difficult. Once you do a couple of them, it becomes a lot easier because it's all the same algebra every time you do this. So what I do is very first, I divide this into 3 sections. So I'm going to type these numbers into my calculator and get them all on the level playing field. So 9.7 squared is 94.09. 6.8 squared plus 14.7 squared is 262. Crap. Okay, 262. I also have the world's smallest eraser selected. 262.33 minus 2 times 6.8 times 14.7 is 199.92, and then I still have this cosine of z character over here. Okay, so now I am trying to solve for z, so I'm doing this just like algebra. My next step will always be to subtract this term right here. When I subtract it, my answer will always be negative. So 94.09 minus 262.33, and I get negative 168.24. Don't forget this minus sign. That's where people mess up. That negative 199.92 times the cosine of z. Okay, so this will always come out to be a negative number right there. Okay, then my next step is always now to divide by this negative number still left on the right side. So it will always be a negative divided by a negative. So negative 168.24 divided by negative 199.92. This will always come out to be a positive decimal. If at any point this doesn't work out, you need to reevaluate yourself. Okay? Now all I need is the angle to come out. So when I need an angle to come out, I have to do inverse. So cosine inverse of 0.8415, and out pops 33 degrees. So this is a lot of work here. You have to identify that it's law of cosines. Then you have to identify who's A. So then you plug the side A right here and the angle A right there. Plug in B and C however you want to. Now divide them into these 3 brackets and type those into your calculator. Subtract on both sides here to get a negative. Divide your negative on both sides here to get a positive decimal, and then inverse cosine. So it's a lot of work, but it's the same steps every time. Okay, so this one is a multi-step, and it's the double up ones where it wants you to do both cosine and sine. I'm just going to do the first step, the law of cosines. We'll get a little more in depth Monday. Okay, so I start out same way, labeling side angle side, so I know that this is cosines, and this is going to be my angle A, and I'm going to use, because he's the only angle, and I'm going to use him to find the side that's across from him. So that's going to be my side A. So even if you just wanted to call that, what is happening to my life? What? Even if you just wanted to call that A instead of X, then you could do that. If you want to call it X, it's totally your life. And these two fellas over here, they can be B and C, and they can be used interchangeably. Okay, so A squared equals B squared plus C squared minus 2 times B times C times the cosine of angle A. So just get that all plugged in there just like I like it. Now this is probably the easiest of the four. Law of cosines for an angle is the hardest of the four. Law of cosines for a side is the easiest of all four, because I'm just going to literally tap all of this into my calculator right now. 5 squared plus 9 squared minus 2 times 5 times 9 times the cosine of 109. Enter. I get a squared is equal to 135.301. Now that's a squared, so all I have to do is square root both sides. So the square root of 135 is 11.6, and there she is. Just like that, tappy tappy. Okay, so I did one of each kind, a law of sines for a side, a law of sines for an angle, cosine for a side, and cosine for an angle. So you've seen all of them. So why don't you do some practice, whether it's on this worksheet or whether it is on the review that you got. The last section is the law of sines. Just do some practice so that when you come to class on Monday, you can work independently and hone your skills instead of having to start all over. Okay, y'all stay safe and stay warm.